Thank you, scholars. That was wonderful, wasn't it? Can I have, please join me in another round of applause for all of our scholars? And while I'm thanking people, we could not have this event tonight without the generosity of CIBC, and so I thank you all. They're somewhere in the room. Thank you very much. My glasses. They're in here somewhere. Okay. Good evening, and welcome to Columbus Classical Academy. My name is Mike Gross, and I feel privileged and blessed to be serving as the president of the board here at the school. Welcome to the first of hopefully many great speaker events here at Columbus Classical. Mr. Gibson will talk a little bit about that later in his closing remarks. So the problem in education today is that it's lost its mission. Those are the words of Dr. Larry Arnn, our featured guest this evening. And it is my great privilege on behalf of Columbus Classical Academy to introduce to you the man who, perhaps more than any other American today, is helping to recover the true mission of education in our nation. Dr. Arnn is the 12th president of Hillsdale College and has been a transformative leader since 2000, advancing the college's mission of classical liberal arts education and intellectual freedom. Under his leadership, Hillsdale launched the K-12 Classical Curriculum Initiative, offering resources to primary and secondary schools like Columbus Classical Academy, and fostering a well-rounded education in Western tradition and civic virtue for children nationwide. In addition to these efforts, Dr. Arnn plays a hands-on role on Hillsdale's online education, teaching courses in U.S. Constitution, the Great Books, and Winston Churchill. These free online courses have brought Hillsdale's educational philosophy to millions of learners worldwide, helping people engage with fundamental questions of politics, philosophy, and history. And Dr. Arnn also launched Hillsdale's podcast network, where he hosts The Larry Arnn Show, featuring discussions with prominent intellectuals on education, governance, and culture. His deep expertise in history, exemplified by his work with Sir Martin Gilbert on the Churchill biography, continues to enrich both the scholarship and his leadership at Hillsdale. Our mission at Columbus Classical Academy is to form knowledgeable and virtuous human beings. The ability to pursue that educational mission is largely a credit to the work of Dr. Larry Arnn at Hillsdale College. We are greatly blessed to have him with us this evening, a teacher, a scholar, and a leader, and a man on a mission, the right mission. So please help me give a warm CCA welcome to Dr. Larry Arnn.
Thank you. I'm very proud to be here. Today at lunch, I was with some big crowd at the Center for Christian Values, and I offered a trade. I wonder if he's still here. And I'm going to try again. Now, first of all, I think there are people in here, in this room, who may be grateful to Hillsdale College. And if you are, then you owe me something. And what I want is to trade attorneys general between Michigan and Ohio. I don't care who wins the football game. I'll help you throw it. Yeah. Good to see you again, Attorney General. Ours is as bad as yours is good, and that's saying something. I'm proud of the school. I had to get permission to come here. The director of K-12 education at Hillsdale College is a young woman named Kathleen O'Toole, and she's very tough. She has a gesture she likes. She does that. Let's go. She does that all the time. Well, it turns out she's my daughter, and the mother of my grandchildren. And because she's my daughter, I didn't hire her for that job, and it's a really big job. And I was getting ready to hire somebody for it, and the chairman of the board and the provost showed up in my office one day, and I looked up and I said, "What do you deadbeats want?" And they said, "We're going to hire a director of K-12." And I said, "We are." And they said, we want to do it. And I can say to your excellent headmistress, Miss Spalding, it's a really good idea if you're running anything, that if somebody wants to do something, you should let them. And so I said, go ahead, do it. And they said, and I would have said that to just about anybody. If you walk in my office, I'll probably say, go ahead. Anyway, they said, well, we want to make the final decision. And I said, well, that's not quite how it works. And they said, one time. And then I knew what they wanted to do. And I said, you won't be able to hire her. And they said, why not? And I said, well, she had founded a school in our network down in Texas. And she'd done that at my suggestion. She was a young PhD. She's a very attractive girl. She's a really good teacher. And she was very popular. And they wanted to hire her husband, who hadn't finished his PhD yet, my first of two worthless sons-in-law. and you're going to find out all about how my family works. And she said, I don't want to bring him here. And I said, why? And she said, well, these are not good people at the college where she was down in Kentucky. And I said, well, you set a standard like that, you're going to have trouble finding a job. She said, anyway, she said, I want to be able to stay home and color when the time comes. She has now borne my two grandchildren, who are better than yours. And I can show you pictures. And she said, I said, you should be a school headmaster because of this. She's got the mind for it, but also she likes to do that, right? She said, I could never do that. And I said, okay. She said, why do you think I could? And I said, who's the world's leading expert on the combination of running a school and you? You'd be good at it in 3 months. And she was, as is your headmistress. This is a beautiful thing. I'm proud to be here. I didn't realize you had such a good facility for it. That's not common in young schools. That's a hard nut to crack. So you guys cracked that nut. And now you got more to crack, and you can crack them. I'm asked to tell you 2 things, so I'll tell you 3. One is, what do we mean by classical when we apply it to a school? I'll try to answer that. This young man right here is going to help me because I asked these kids who was the wisest of them, and they all pointed at that boy who came up here and sang a minute. What is your name, young man? Christopher. Christopher, are you wise?
I would not consider myself to be.
Very good. Do you know what the word means? Wisdom? You guys get a glimpse of what I do for a living. It's hard, isn't it?
Yes.
Part of my point tonight. These kids are good, by the way. Who's the one I had an argument with about good? Where's that girl? She's still here? And so I got to talking to her, and she asked, do you know what she asked me? I can't believe she'd do it. She said, why should I go to Hillsdale instead of Harvard? Harvard. And I said, it's the difference between good and bad. And she said, I see. And I said, do you see? What is the difference between good and bad? And she said she didn't know. And then she said, but Harvard's a good school. Contradiction, please. What is your name, dear? I forgot. Phoebe. Phoebe, what's your last name? I won't forget again. My second point is about these things, these words, what do kids need to know? And the third point, and I'll be done, is why is the school important? I think I can answer those 3 questions. First of all, why do we call it classical? That's kind of weird, isn't it? Oh, there's Moses, the pianist. No, you're not Moses. Moses is your brother. What is your name?
Edward.
Edward, and you're the pianist. And your parents are music people. And they want you to go to Hillsdale. and there's a 20% chance you'll get in. Are you guys running a rugged school here? Joyful, what was that in the thing? Joyful in the face of difficulty. That might be the best of them, you know. So the classical world, that means classically, that means 450 BC to round numbers 450 AD. That's the pagan and the birth of the Christian world. And two things happened in that world that are world-changing. Those two things come together to form the West. They're not the same thing, but they're alike. The first thing that happened was a fellow named Socrates started asking annoying questions, exactly like the ones I was just asking these kids. He got killed for it, finally, because the questions were kind of a rebellion. He said, in the first book of Plato's Republic, for example, in the final and longest conversation in that book, it's an argument between Socrates and a man named Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus is, people like him populate the world today, by the way. What he did was he taught young people to be powerful in argument so they could be strong, and he did it for money. And that means that he wasn't teaching them about the truth exactly, because power would be something you could exert, and the truth would be something you don't make. You would obey it if you could know it. It would be a service to try to find it out. And Socrates is arguing with this guy, and there are two young men in the conversation. Their names are Glaucon and Adeimantus, and they are Plato's brothers. They're aristocrats. Plato is the son of Ariston. That's the Greek word for the best. Aristocracy, that means the rule of the best. And that usually translates, of course, it has to translate into something, because who's the best? There's only one agreement I've seen here tonight on that. They all agree that that boy, no, there's not an agreement. They all agree that boy's the wisest, and he denies it. So the best, right? They're aristocratic young men, well placed, and Thrasymachus is after them, and he's going to teach them power, which is what we teach in college today. It's the reason why Phoebe must not go to Harvard, because if you just look last spring at what was happening there, they couldn't send the students safely to class because they were in an argument about power. Who exercises it? Who ought to? How do we get it? Socrates destroys Thrasymachus thereby saved Plato's brothers. That's the drama in Book 1 of Plato's Republic. And here's how he does it. It's very beautiful, by the way. You should all go home and read it tonight. And every night. Why not? He says, okay, Thrasymachus, you say justice is the interest of the strongest person. That means whatever he says it is. Let's say you're the strongest person. What is in your interest? And of course, this part of the conversation is about 6 pages long. And it quickly turns into the question, what is good for you? Or the basic first question in philosophy, what is the good? We all need to know that. Phoebe couldn't argue with me for 60 seconds, having tried to taunt me with Harvard College without applying the word good to it, because of course that is the only reason anybody would go there, or to Hillsdale College. Show me what's good. Does strength have to do with that? Is that what makes good? He gives them examples. What if you want something that'll kill you? Damage you? You see? That urgent question is born right there. And it's important that it's a universal question. He doesn't say, this is why Socrates is killed, finally. He doesn't say, what does Athens say it is? He doesn't say, what does the law say it is? He says, we're thinking people, let's figure it out. And that means it doesn't matter how you're placed. It doesn't matter whether you're strong or rich, or big or small. What is good? Everybody wants to know the answer to that question. Philosophy is born in that question. The classical world is completed by the addition of that question. To what was it added? God made a covenant with Abraham. In the ancient city, the gods were the gods of a particular people. Mostly they were the family gods, the ancestors of the leading families. If you go to Pompeii today, you can see in those well-preserved places that were buried in ash that they had, and Pompeii is much later than the Greek classical world. It's 400 years later. They keep an eternal fire going. Think how hard that was in the ancient world. And they burn parts of their dinner for the ancestors so that they can be fed later after they die. And that means their family is eternal. And that means God is the God of their family. And that's the ancient city. That's what it was like. The Olympian gods are not as powerful for most of Greek history. Some of this was decaying by the time of Socrates, but it was still present and they still had the fires. God says to Abraham, I will be your God, and you will be my people. And this will be a blessing to all the peoples on the face of the earth. One God, one good, one truth. In reason and revelation, those doctrines come together to form Western civilization. And it's very good because those are very urgent questions. Phoebe can't go to decide where to go to college without an opinion about the good. She can't think about her death and in virtue of what will she live her life without some thoughts about God, which Aristotle had as much as Abraham did. You see? And that's the same for the human, because the human is human. That also, by the way, is the magic of America. When in the course of human events, that means any time, right? Not now, anytime. It becomes necessary for one people, that means any people, not just us, to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. What are those laws? They seem to apply everywhere. If you want to be this fledgling little colony, group of colonies, not even one colony, several colonies, and you've only operated together a few times in a Congress that's pretty ramshackle, and you got no army, and you're going to take on the strongest living man, you need something to which to appeal. And that law, the laws of nature and of nature's God, are available to everyone, whoever they are, king and commoner, English and American, anybody, anywhere, anytime. And that means that they provide an answer, a way to seek to answer that question that Phoebe must answer when she decides where to go to college, or decides whether not to fib to her mother. It's in the honor code here. Of course, it has to be. We're humans. We face that question. Now, classical schools go back to that. And the reason it's useful to go back to that is, first of all, they were first. Universal monotheism. Jesus, by the way, perfects that. Do you ever think about the political requirements of Christianity? Because it's a very odd religion. It's a advance or development on Judaism, which itself is unique and unprecedented in the history of the world. Because Jesus says he's everybody's God. He made everything. He's the only route to salvation. He's the first priority of everything. And he says, my kingdom is not of this world. And that means there's a limit on the law. You have to have freedom of religion, because you can't go to heaven through the law, but you got to have the law. The law must not mess up your attempt to go to heaven, your worship. Now those relationships, those are fundamental and eternal, and we all need to know them. Especially now, in this controversial time, when the world is ruled by Thrasymachus, whose lesson is, there's not really anything fundamental to know. Just get strong, be successful, be the strongest, you see. My second question is, what do these kids need to know? It's easy to summarize. You think it's a myriad of things. It isn't. It's 4 things. It's actually, 2 kinds of things. The first thing they have to do is get good at what we call the human skills, right? There are capacities that only human beings on earth have. And they are summarized as reading, writing, and arithmetic. They are direct operations of human reason. Do you know, if you look at schools today, that's part of my third point, but I'll mention it now. We are struggling in the United States of America, in the age of artificial intelligence, to teach young people to read. But they can already read. Do the kindergartners here learn to read? Mrs. Spalding? In every case, they do read. Do you know why? I mean, the kindergartners here are not as smart as my granddaughter. How could they be? But my granddaughter is not yet 4, and she's starting to read, and the reason is she can already talk. And she taught herself how to do that. And it's the same phenomenon, right? So they need that. They need to be good at that. It is the human way. It's like dogs wag their tails. We think and talk, and that's the same thing. Thinking and talking, by the way, in us are the same thing. Think how social that makes us. We understand the world more richly than any other being, and we can say whatever we can think. And that means we can think together. That's why a school. After they get the human skills, and that's going to go on, by the way, for the rest of their lives, but they'll be good at it by the time they graduate here. And they'll be good at it in more than one language. And that's handy, because it's good to learn another language for 2 reasons. One is, it's hard to do. It's a very good idea to do hard things. How can you be joyful in the face of difficulty if you don't have difficulty? You need it. You're going to meet it anyway. Might as well get used to it when you're young. Also, I can tell you from experience, young people urgently want that. They're bored if they don't face it. After that, the other kind of thing they need is knowledge. And knowledge breaks down into 2 parts. Knowledge of natural things, that would be physics and chemistry and biology, and math, which is also a kind of language. They need to study those things. They need to know how the world works. If they don't, they'll be ignoramuses, and they'll walk around surprised by a rainstorm or something. Do you know the philosopher Jack Handy? He's a Saturday Night Live philosopher. See, it's only people who have cynical sense of humor that laugh when I say that word. One of his aphorisms is, Daddy, what causes the rain? Answer, God is crying. Why is he crying? Probably because of something you did. I think it's tragic that whole families have to be torn apart by a simple thing like a pack of wild dogs. That's another one. Both of my daughters have quoted Jack Handey in commencement addresses, finishing high school. I'm telling you about my family. So they need knowledge, right? And the natural world. But then the human world is another world. And that's because we are the thing that has discretion in nature. We don't, birds will adorn their nests, sometimes differently. They don't make shard cathedral. We do that. Birds sing. They sing by instinct. Andrew, is that your name?
Edward.
Edward. Do you mind changing your name to Andrew? Because Edward can play, he can compose. You see, it's a human gift. We make things, and we have to study the things that we've made. We have to study the human story that's in history. We have to study human art and literature, all of that. We have to know the human story, and then we can contribute to it and live under the best of it, you see. That's what they need to know. You know what they don't need to know? They don't need to know how to weld. Although I will tell you that I was a welder. My two favorite jobs, one in graduate school, I was a waiter. I'm an okay college president. I was a really good waiter. And I was a welder for a while. And welding is fun and handy. You can make some money welding these days. But they don't need to know that. They don't know if they're going to be welders, right? They need to know things that last. They need to know eternal things. History is a kind of eternal thing because it's unchangeable. Great works of literature, and by great, what we mean, kids, to you, what we mean when you first encounter it is hard. Hard is better. But the reason it's hard is because it's beautiful and will last. And you need to know things that last so you can grow up right. That's a classical school. And it teaches kids what they need to know so they can grow to be excellent human beings. Aristotle writes, if you can know what a good horse is, you can know what a good person is. If you don't know what a good horse is, just go watch any horse racing movie. I talked about this at lunch. It's one of my favorite things. I don't care for horses all that much. I think they're great, but I don't know much about them. Love to watch them run, don't you? And horse racing movies are always wonderful. And they always have exactly the same plot. And they always make you cry at the end, unless your soul is no good. Did you know that Seabiscuit won? And so did Secretariat. And I've watched both those movies more than once and more than twice. And my wife and I watched Seabiscuit the other night, and both of us cried. Of course we did. He won. He did. A good human is brave and moderate and prudent and just and faithful, right? That's the secretariat of being a human, you see. And you have to cultivate those things. And if you do that, you can do what Aristotle says you can do. If you're good, you can be happy. My elder daughter, that one, when she was a little girl, she wanted her way. And if I told her she couldn't have her way, she would run to her room, crying, and leap on the bed on her back and kick her feet up and down. And I'd stick my head in there and I'd say, "What's wrong with you?" She'd say, "Why don't you let me be happy?" And I would say, "You're too young to be happy. You have to learn to be good." She wrote her doctoral thesis on Aristotle on that specific point. She is happy now. Why is the school important? because it's a solution to an attack upon nature that is far advanced in the country and is an attack upon us too. The word nature, you know, means birth in Latin. You guys read Latin here, right? And natura. It means how a living thing is born and grows, right? First meaning of nature is, you know, when you say women who get married and change their name will sometimes say their name is somebody, nay, somebody, somebody. Nay, that's a form of that word nature, born that way. I was born with this name. Now, I married this deadbeat man and took his name. So this attack on nature, what does it mean? It means that these laws of nature and nature's God that are in the Declaration of Independence and that also give rise to the Constitution of the United States, which is the greatest thing of its kind written in human history and the longest lived, although it's in trouble right now. It is built on the nature of the human being. And remember, nature and truth are things to find out, places in which you find your freedom, but also they are things to obey. What if we don't want to obey? What if we just want to be strong? Could we remake the whole society? We live in the engineered society now. Everything is from above. The worst thing in the world, running a school, I can tell you, is rules are always a bad idea. I missed the President's Council meeting of our athletic conference, a bunch of Ohio and Michigan schools. Good places, I like the presidents. But I wasn't there last week, and darned if they didn't pass a rule. And I don't like them to do it. And I'm going to try to get them to repeal it next time. And I promise they wouldn't have passed it if I'd been there. Because if you can do without it, don't do it. And goals are better than rules. There's the rules. You see? And raising a kid is rather like raising a dog, you know, with this difference. The kid does it. You just tell them and help them understand what they are to do, and then they set to work on it. And that's the same principle of management. Winston Churchill said, "The safeguard and the glory of mankind is that it is easy to lead and hard to drive." So we don't like rules at Hillsdale College. We have goals. And the only rules that work are the rules your mother told you before you ever came to this school. And that's always, you know, be good, tell the truth, brush your teeth, you know. Stuff you know already. That's the only rules you can actually remember. America used to be run like that. Do you know that I could count, they're here probably. There's probably 20 or 25% as many administrators in this school as there are teachers. Might not be that many. And the administrators probably teach too. In public education in America today, employing millions of people, more than half of them are not teachers. What do? They make rules how to run a school. Rules made by people who do not work in the schools. And what I told you about the meaning of classical, that is the product of a lifetime of learning, and I know quite a lot about it. But it's also true that it was pretty simple, wasn't it? Everybody can understand it. And that means that everybody could figure out how to run this school if they just set about it in the right way. And we can help, because that's what we do. So it's a top-down government now. Also, it's wedded to a system of political power that gets its strength in elections included, because the government controls half the economy of the United States. And before 1930, it was never as much as 12%. Also, where the money is has changed. Of the 12% that was in the public sector in 1930, 62 or 3% was in Columbus, in this county, and local governments. 21% was at the federal level. Now these local governments have 18% and the federal government has 62%. And that means the money has been moved away from the people who make it, first out of their pockets, and then into a remote government that makes universal, hopelessly complex rules that only experts can follow. And when you students study politics, which is a fundamental subject, because we're made for politics, because of the way we think, the different way that we think compared to other creatures, we understand right and wrong, and we can talk about it, which means we can reason about it in common, and that's what politics is. And so when you study that, you will see that the hallmark of the American system was that it was a bottom-up system, and national power was reserved as a smaller part of the total national power, public and private, and even a smaller part of the total government power, and reserved to things that were national in their nature. And this school is not such a thing. This is a school where a bunch of kids and their parents and teachers gather to help the students learn, and the learning is primarily in the students, not in the teachers and the parents. I like to say you don't teach them, they learn. All you do is help them grow. And if they're not thinking hard at every moment, they do not learn. So those are my 3 points. This is a classical school. It is good for the kids because it will teach them what the word good means. And they'll be thinking about that for the rest of their lives. It is good for the kids because it will help them to have good characters and to grow in the knowledge that they need to function excellently as human beings. It is important because it has the makings of a revolution in it that might just save our freedom, which is in serious difficulty right now. And this school reform movement gathering steam is the single most hopeful thing of which I know. Although I invite you to remember to vote in November. So I thank you for doing this. I am proud to be able to be of help. We will continue to be so. Make this school the greatest on earth. Thanks.